Hello, hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily, and today we're doing part 3 of my Names in the Hunger Games series. This has been so much fun to compile and put together for everyone, so I hope you're still enjoying it. I've loved learning more about these characters in such a beloved book series, one that I loved reading growing up, and I've loved getting to kind of re-explore and rediscover in my late 20s. If you haven't watched them yet and you're curious about parts 1 and 2, I'll have those linked down for you below in the description, so feel free to check those out either before or after. It doesn't really matter when. And the last thing before we get started is I want to give a brief spoiler warning because, I don't trust myself not to spoil characters or parts of all of these books. So that includes the original trilogy as well as the Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes and Suzanne Collins' newest book at the time of recording this, Sunrise on the Reaping. If you don't want to be spoiled, pause the video, read the books, come on back. I'll still be here waiting. And with that, let's get started. Cinna as a character is one that we as the readers and viewers don't get to know too much about. We don't really know his history. We just kind of know what he tells Katniss. What we know about him is often shown more through his designs and what he doesn't say or do versus what he does. A secret rebel, Cinna is a capital citizen who is very different from the other capital people that we meet, like Effie, for example. He's very plain dressed and wears much less elaborate makeup, and he looks what we would probably consider fairly normal. He doesn't necessarily strike us as someone who would be a capital stylist the moment that we meet him. His capital accent, as Katniss calls it, is also much less pronounced than a lot of the other people Katniss meets, making some fans think and speculate that maybe he wasn't always a capital citizen or maybe he wasn't born in the capital. That is speculation, we don't know for sure, but it's definitely a possibility. Suzanne does like to sneak in these little hints or clues about characters that we don't maybe always pick up on. Maybe one day we'll know for certain one way or another, but I feel like Suzanne does put a lot of these things into her books as to not spoon feed us information, and Katniss, as a very unreliable narrator, also doesn't ask a lot of questions. So we don't always get to know a lot of the information that I think a lot of fans really want to know. But not only was the 74th Hunger Games his first Hunger Games as a stylist, but he also asked for District 12 specifically. And it's Cinna's work as Katniss's stylist that creates this image of Katniss that the people of the capital learn to love. He helped her stand out to the capital citizens, and in my opinion is one of the biggest reasons why she was able to win the Hunger Games, along with many other reasons, of course. But he helped create the iconic symbol of the girl on fire. Cinna is also a warm and kind person, often becoming Katniss's confidant throughout her time in the capital prior to the games, in both the original Hunger Games and in Catching Fire. He is someone who, without even telling her directly, made it known to her that he believed in her as the symbol of the rebellion. And so I had a hard time finding people with the name Cinna, or that would relate to the name Cinna. It's not a common name by any means, so I ended up just starting with the Hunger Games wiki and seeing what it could tell me about maybe the etymology of his name and maybe what Suzanne was going for. So according to the Hunger Games wiki, Cinna appears to be named after Gnaeus Cornelius Cinna Magnus, better known simply as Cinna, who was the first person pardoned by the Emperor Augustus for his conspiracy against him. This makes sense as Suzanne, as we all probably know by now, has taken a lot of names from ancient Greece and ancient Rome and used them in the Hunger Games. But I want to go just a little bit further, because I always do, and I also feel like, unlike a lot of the other people who she's named characters after in history, there's always been a very clear-cut connection, and when reading about Cinna in ancient Rome, there wasn't too much that I could find that really felt like it related to this character to me. In the books and in the film, Cinna isn't pardoned at all for his help in the rebellion. In fact, he is killed for it. After designing Katniss's wedding dress, which when she spun turned into the Mockingjay, he was taken away right before her going into the games and killed. Cinna is one of the harder names to be able to find any information on because it's not a common name by any means. I found some sources that said it was of Greek origin. I had some sources that say it was of American origin, and I couldn't really find any sort of consensus around this name. And so honestly, the only other thing I could think of was Cinna and cinnamon, so I was like, I guess we're gonna go in this direction because I really wasn't sure where else to look. And it felt like there had to be more. I always go too far with this, I know, but I felt like there had to be more here. Cinnamon is a spice obtained from the bark of a tree from the genus Cinnamomum. And cinnamon actually has a really rich history amongst many, many different cultures, even beyond using it as just a spice or flavoring. Many cultures, like in China, used it as medicine, but also the ancient Egyptians used it as part of the embalming process as well. For the Romans, though, which of course I always have to go there first because I feel like that's the clearest connection with the rest of the Hunger Games, for the Romans it was a symbol of wealth and comfort. Two qualities, which I think Cinna embodies really well. Being a capital citizen, we can assume that he has some sort of wealth, but also that he is a source of comfort for characters like Katniss as well. And cinnamon to me really evokes a certain image, whether it's fall or Christmas or just like a cozy feeling of being at home. And I think not only because it had roots in a person from ancient Rome, but this sort of feeling that comes from cinnamon is why Suzanne chose the name Cinna. This is totally just my opinion. Also, actually, all of this is just my opinion, so if you have any different ideas for any of these names, definitely let me know. And if you know something I don't, please correct me, let me know. This is just me going based off my own research. But going beyond the connection to this guy from ancient Rome, I think that having him linked to nature and being comforting really suits him, as there's this sort of, yes, he's in the capital, but also he isn't quite like everyone else. And for Katniss, he's a source of comfort in a world that is incredibly dangerous and out to kill her constantly. And I also have to mention, now I have no grounds for this, like I have no source for this. This is just something that I was thinking about as I kept saying Cinna over and over and over to myself. But it's hard not to think about when you hear the name Cinna, how close it sounds to sinner, especially if you say it in like a more southern or even Appalachian accent. There have been other biblical references throughout the Hunger Games, so I feel like it could be intentional, but I have no like resource for that at all, other than it was just something I thought about. But it would have felt weird not to mention it because it was just something that came up while I was thinking about it, even if it isn't like a fully formed thought. But if someone else has some sort of information about this, please let me know, because it definitely feels like there's some sort of connection there for me. Moving on to one of our more controversial characters is we're going to talk about Gale, and this was a very interesting name to think about. Of course, I again started with the Hunger Games wiki just to see kind of what it was thinking when it came to Gale's name. And this is what it told me. Gale is a word for a powerful wind befitting his intense, stormy demeanor. That has to be pretty accurate, which is really funny because while it is used for stormy winds, it's also used to be pleasant and merry. So it kind of is, he's kind of a character of two sides of a coin, you know what I'm saying? It can also mean a forceful outburst, someone who has gales of laughter. What I find interesting about this is how it goes from one to the other, and how a nice summer breeze can feel really good on a hot summer day. Having that breeze, you know, can really help take you down if the heat is a bit too high. I'm having a really hard time forming words. But having too much of that causes a storm, and that can lead you astray. And I do think that that really suits Gale's character, as he's someone who has a lot of rage and anger. And I actually find him to be a very interesting character to talk about. I don't think he's a great dude by any means, but I think from a character writing perspective, he's really interesting because in a lot of ways, the gale, right, the wind, fans the fire. And that fire, you could say, is Katniss and her need for revenge or justice, but it could also be that he's fanning the flames of his own anger because he's someone who is just so angry at the world and he wants to take it out on everyone and everything, and he doesn't really care who gets hurt on the way. So kind of having these two sides is really, really interesting, and I think it kind of plays on this, like, does he have a softer side, and does he kind of show it to Katniss? Like, yes, I think at moments, but I think it's really more that intense, stormy wind, that demeanor that he has, where he kind of just takes over and, yeah, lets everybody deal with his anger for him. It's a really interesting choice for him, and I actually quite like it. His last name is also really interesting. So pulling from the wiki again, his surname Hawthorne comes from hawthorn bushes or trees, but could also be a reference to author Nathaniel Hawthorne, whose writings often suggest that guilt, sin, and evil are innate to humanity. I also think that that is a very obvious and great connection that Suzanne could have made, because Gale is someone who definitely thinks that the capital, all of them, are evil just by existing in the capital. He's angry. I mean, he has every right to be angry. I'm not I'm not saying that the people in the districts shouldn't be mad at the Capitol. I've seen a lot of people talk about the Hunger Games recently saying one of the messages of the Hunger Games is you have to hate the acts more than the people. And I think that Gale often hates the people more than he hates what they're doing. And that is a defining difference between him and a lot of the other people in the rebellion. And I think his surname being Hawthorne also connects beautifully to this imagery of people in District 12 naming, particularly in the people around Katniss, about how a lot of them have names derived from nature. He is someone like Katniss who goes out into nature a lot. He knows how to hunt, he knows how to survive, so he has a lot of these same skills, and I do also like that connection with his name. But there was one other thing that I found really interesting, and I don't necessarily think this is what Suzanne was intending, but I read about something called the Hawthorne effect, and that's basically where people notice that they're being watched or observed, they change their behavior. So when people are working and they know that someone is watching over their shoulder, they're going to work differently than when nobody's there. And this was just really interesting because it kind of immediately made me think about like Big Brother or cameras or just constantly being watched. And I don't know, I feel like that kind of also fits with him in a lot of ways. Like they constantly feel like they're being watched, and he's very guarded and he has his guard up all the time. And I feel like that also is one of the reasons why he's got such a harsh exterior. Like, I feel like he's just this ball of energy, like pent up rage that's just constantly swirling within him. And he can never feel like safe to let it out. And it really makes me wonder, like, if they didn't live in District 12 or if they lived in a different time, like, what would Gale have been like? And what is it about his upbringing that has made him the way that he is specifically? Like, he's a very interesting character. But yeah, I think his was a bit more on the nose in terms of, like, where his name comes from. But I also found it really interesting. And now I want to talk about Lenore Dove, a rebellious girl who believed anything was possible and wanted a better future for those after the Hunger Games. She makes me so sad. I know a lot of people don't like her as much as Lucy Gray, or they think that she's, like, a Lucy Gray wannabe or whatever. But honestly, I think a lot of people misread her character, but that's for a different video. That's for a different time. But Suzanne makes it glaringly obvious that Lenore Dove's name is a reference to Edgar Allan Poe, and in particular, his poem, The Raven. I do want to go into a whole deep dive at some point about The Raven and how it connects to Sunrise on the Reaping and Lenore/Haymitch's characters in this book. I won't bog you down with all the details now, but the name Lenore itself is of Germanic origin and is a combination of two elements, Leon meaning lion and Nora meaning honor or light. It's a very sweet and feminine sounding name as well, which when I pictured Haymitch in the original series, he's such a broken, sad, like gruff man. He's been through a lot. And so seeing him be so sweet with such a sweet, and I don't know, there's just something, the dichotomy between who he is when we first meet him in the original trilogy and where he is in Sunrise on the Reaping, I think it's just really important that she's just soft and feminine, and he is a different person when he's around her. And I think it just works really well as this sort of first love of Haymitch. She's kind of got this aura about her. And then Doves, of course, evokes an image of romance and beauty, purity, peace. And in ancient Greece and Rome, it was seen as a symbol of love and beauty, as the dove is representative of Aphrodite or Venus. We see them released during weddings, and I feel like that connects and juxtaposes beautifully with this idea of nature, which I think connects and juxtaposes beautifully between her rebellious nature and all of the collisions that she's had with the peacekeepers. Because doves are peace. They mean peace, and she's against the peacekeepers. I don't know. There's something. But then why this connection to The Raven and Edgar Allan Poe? Well, I'm glad you asked. In the narrative poem The Raven, which is referenced frequently throughout the book, which really does need its own video to break down fully, but an unnamed narrator is sitting alone in his house as he mourns his lost love, Lenore. After a very one-sided conversation with the Raven, who appears, the narrator basically comes to the conclusion that he will always be in pain over the loss of his love, and will never be able to forget the memories of her, no matter how hard he tries. This poem, at the end of the day, is a poem about undying love. But what I didn't know before researching this is that actually it's a specific type of narrative poem, which, you guessed it, also relates back to ancient Greece. Guys, this word, I've had a lot of tricky words that I've had to say in these videos, but this one This one really takes the cake. It's called Periclosithron poetry, which means to lament by the door. Which basically, it means it's a love poem where a man is lamenting about a lost love that he quite literally is shut out from. Like, there is a door between them. Original forms of this poetry often took place or around these like very merry celebrations. So in often cases in the beginning, this was a drunk man professing his love, but over time it became a much sadder lamentation about love and became more self-deprecating and pity. Edgar Allan Poe also wrote a poem called Lenore, which I really can't get into as well, but that is about the grief of dealing with the loss of a young, beautiful woman as well, named Lenore. Potentially the same Lenore that The Raven is about, but about a young woman who died too soon and how we should mourn people who died too soon. It could go on, but I'm sure you get the picture. I think there are some pretty clear connections to this story and Haymitch and Lenore Dove. His inability to forget about her and how guilty he feels for causing her death with the red gumdrops, how she was such a young girl who died in his arms. He uses alcohol to numb the pain and forget about her, but he can't. In this sense, using Lenore Dove and the Raven is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think Suzanne wanted us to know from the beginning that Lenore was doomed, even if we kind of already knew that. But I think even having the knowledge that she's doomed from the beginning kind of puts this metaphorical gray haze over the story. Like, we are literally seeing the ghosts of Haymitch's past. And so if you have any sort of background with The Raven or Edgar Allan Poe and this sort of melancholic song that she was named after, you know straight away like what's going down. The use of that really just, it puts this kind of haze over everything. Like, you see this girl full of life, and she brings so much love and life into Haymitch's life, knowing that she's going to die. And it's so heartbreaking, honestly. And Lenore Dove, of course, is also part of the covey. So her name comes from a ballad. In this case, it's the raven and a color. I also think it's not a mistake that dove is a type of gray that relates back to Lucy Gray. So we've got a couple different things happening here. Her name, her story, definitely intentional. I would love to do a full breakdown at some point, so let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Rue is the District 11 girl tribute in the 74th Hunger Games, and she was also the youngest in the 74th Hunger Games at only 12 years old. Katniss sees her and is immediately reminded of her little sister Prim. And when researching this, I also learned that Rue was the oldest of her there's 6 of them. She was the oldest of her 5 siblings, meaning that even though she was the same age as Prim in the family order, she's at the same spot as Katniss. And it made everything a little bit more heartbreaking about what happens to Rue, because it kind of makes you think like she probably felt this protective need for her family as well. And it makes you wonder, like, was she thinking about the same things that Katniss would have at that age about Prim, who would be younger than 12 at that time? Like, Rue is only 12 years old and she's sitting here being sent to her death, and she's probably thinking about her younger siblings and feeling some sort of need to protect them at the same time, and yet she's just a kid who also needs protecting. I'm getting way too far into this really fast, but I have so many thoughts about Rue as a character. But I think it's just a parallel between the two of them that I hadn't thought about before. It's even more heartbreaking. Like, according to the wiki, she usually gave her food rations to her younger siblings and foraged in the fields to provide more food for them. District 11 has very strict laws, and Rue could be punished for helping her family in this way. It reminded me of Katniss a bit, and how she would go out illegally into the woods to hunt and help provide for her family as well. It makes you wonder, like, yeah, Katniss is, I think, 16 in the first book, so she's 4 years older, but we can assume she's been doing it for a bit. So, like, if Rue had been living in District 12 and in similar circumstances to Katniss, would she be also doing that? Is that something that, like, I don't know, I like all of a sudden was seeing these parallels of like Rue as a young Katniss as well. While Katniss sees Prim in this little girl, Katniss's mom probably sees Katniss. You know what I mean? Like had Rue had the time to hone her own skills, would she have had a better chance of winning? Rue is also gentle and kind, and she is the epitome of innocence brought into such a horrible circumstance. And I think it's really fitting with her name, because her name, similar to Gale actually, is also kind of like a double-sided coin. Rue is the name of an herb. It is a yellow flowered herb called the herb of grace, but it can also mean regret.
You'll rue this day, you'll rue it!
Sorry, I could not get that clip out of my mind when I was researching. I had to include it. But yeah, her name can also mean regret, sorrow, and remorse. And I think both of these dual meanings fit beautifully with her character. Her death, and in turn Katniss's act of surrounding her with flowers after her death, is seen as the first real act of rebellion within the games. This feeling of sorrow and loss against losing a fellow tribute. And, you know, we have to remember the people in the districts to the capital are viewed as, like, nothing more than animals, basically. And according to the games, Katniss shouldn't even care about Rue's death. Like, she should be glad that there's one less person to kill or compete against, but she chooses not to. She chooses to mourn and feel sorrowful for her. I found one quote from this website about caring for Rue plants that just broke me. In the care guide, it says, Rue is a perennial that comes back yearly but is not long-lived. It will self-seed to produce new plants in the garden. And I think that is such a beautiful metaphor for a young girl who was short-lived, but she was the seed of the rebellion that continued to grow, and in that way she will never be forgotten. And that just... wow. Yeah, that broke me. Because at the end of the day, they were all just kids trying to survive. So while she had this beautiful nature-inspired name, potentially because District 11 is also the district of agriculture, so plants are somewhat related to all of this, but also this undercurrent, again, of sorrow and sadness, which I think fits her and her character beautifully. We gotta talk about Ampert. I can't believe it's been this long and I haven't talked about him. He is one of my new favorite characters. Like, he's probably one of my favorite characters that's, like, new to the series that we only met recently in Sunrise on the Reaping. He is the District 3 tribute and also the son of Beatty, my love. He was immediately one of my favorite characters when we first meet him, with his upbeat attitude and this kind of, like, happy-go-lucky look on his face. It's like Haymitch was standing there like, what is going on? Like, why is this kid talking to me? He was so friendly, and he was just like, let's be in an alliance together. And Haymitch was like, okay, what? Of course, like, when I found out he was Beatty's son, I knew it was gonna absolutely wreck me, because we know that none of these kids were gonna make it to the end of the book. And I was like, I can't. The emotions I feel around this book and this whole series is too much sometimes. I knew it was going to hurt a lot, but I didn't want to get too attached to him, and yet I still felt attached to him anyway, because, like, how can you not? He was just like a ray of sunshine. It's hard not to care about someone even when you know their fate is, like, they are doomed to their fate of the narrative, and it just breaks my heart because you want to change it for them, and that's anyway, sorry. He's only 12. Like Rue. Ampert to Haymitch, I don't know if this was ever, like, really stated, but to me it always felt a little bit more like a parallel, similar to Katniss and Rue, like with Prim, that Haymitch maybe saw a little bit of Sid in Ampert as well. I know Haymitch instead forms, like, a much closer sibling relationship with Maisie, but I always felt like Haymitch does have this, like, big brother feeling to him, like he's very protective of the people around him. But it's hard not to make these sort of connections, especially after I started researching this, just after researching Rue, so maybe that's why I'm making that connection. But I do think it's intentional that Suzanne has characters forming relationships with the younger kids as well. So District 3, where Ampert comes from, is the technology district. It's both technology and electronics. So it makes sense that Ampert is this super smart genius kid. Also, Beatty is his dad, so, like, you know, this kid just came out of the womb knowing calculus. But moving on to his name, the name Ampert, as far as I can tell, not a real name in terms of, like no one was really going around naming their kids Ampert. Maybe they will now. And Suzanne does really like to theme the names of the other tributes to their districts. Like, we just see that all the time with her. It's like a meme almost, I feel, in the community, because it's like, it's just so obvious with some of them. So when I first heard his name, the first thing I thought of in my head was like, amp. Like, amp? That has something to do with electricity, right? And I was so right. Amps, or amperate? Not sure. I think it's ampere. Amps or ampere are used to measure electric currents. So obviously this connects the technology back to District 3. So obviously his name just kind of feels like a reference to District 3 and electricity and technology. But, you know, as I'm sitting here, I'm like, I feel like there has to be something more with the potato. We spent so much time learning about the electricity coming from the potato. Why isn't there... Is there something there that I'm just completely glossing over? I can't put it into words, but I feel like there's a connection. They spent so much time with the potato. Honestly, his last name, I think it's Latier. I'm not sure. Are they French? Do we have French last names in the Hunger Games? I don't know. I have no clue. So I looked up on the wiki, on the Hunger Games wiki. The wiki just said, Latier evokes a structured, layered construction. I don't even know what that means. I can't even try to disassemble that. Like, what is that trying to say? And I looked up under Beatty's wiki page, and it said that his last name could be a version of the surname Lautier, belonging to the French chess grandmaster Joel Lautier as a nod to Beatty's intelligence. Maybe. I guess. I think it's possible, but like... Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't even know if Beatty had a last name in the books initially, and that maybe it was, I think I read somewhere, maybe on the wiki, that it was brought into the movies. So that makes me think that maybe it wasn't an intentional last name, and it was just one that they gave them. And then, you know, I have no idea if that came from Suzanne or not. Maybe someone just liked the sound of it or thought it could be an interesting reference. So I'm not going to like dive too deep into it because honestly, I have no idea. That last name, I like looked it up. It doesn't even like really mean anything. So if you have any ideas about that, please let me know down in the comments because I would love to be enlightened. Okay, and that was part 3 of my Names in the Hunger Games series. If you have any suggestions for names for a future video, definitely let me know down in the comments. I absolutely love reading the comments and hearing what everyone has to say. And this like collective knowledge about the series that like really comes out. And I feel like I just learned so much about everyone's different perspectives. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. Thanks again for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.